Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Go with the Flow NHL podcast. Nick Phillips, joined as always by my line mate Kevin Bartman. Kevin, how you doing? I think we're going to have a little bit of a spirited, emotional beginning to this week's episode, as we are both obviously fans of the Chicago Blackhawks, who have fired a significant piece of the organization for the last decade.
Yeah, I was gonna say the tone for this one's gonna be a little somber, a little bit sadder, but yeah, a lot to talk about, a lot to vent about for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think for me, I'm pretty fucking angry. Just being kind of straight up with y'all. Like, obviously, I have fun doing the show, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm yelling like a banshee or just a sad, evil person or anything. But you know, the firing of Joel Quenneville. I don't want to be dramatic, but it kind of feels like the end of an era, the end of a dynasty. Not that the Blackhawks aren't talented or anything, but there's been a steady, downfall, let's call it, since the 2015 Stanley Cup. And in my opinion, I think I put a lot of the blame on Stan Bowman, the general manager, who I think, although he had been given a tough hand with a stagnated salary cap a number of times, I feel like there were several deals, and we can go through them, that I just don't think he maximized the roster to the best of the abilities. And he got put in a tough spot with a stagnated salary cap, like I mentioned. But there was some wiggle room to do some other things at certain times that I think would have been more beneficial. Something like trading Brandon Saad, who you didn't want to pay $6 million a year, and then automatically, before he even skates on the ice, you give Anisimov $4.55 million per year. That's a tough pill to swallow, knowing you could have defended your Stanley Cup with Panarin and Saad both on the roster at the same time, and then obviously trading Panarin to get Saad back. You lose Steven Johns and Teuvo Teravainen. And cap dump trades, you trade a second that turned into Christian Dvorak for David Rundblad. We've talked ad nauseum about their offseason with Kunitz, Manning, and Ward not being so good. And obviously last year, too, the same day they traded Panarin, the day of the draft, Chalmerson for Connor Murphy. The jury's still out, but with Connor Murphy being out for an extended period, which Chalmerson never was in his entire career as a stalwart on the blue line for the Hawks in their top four. A lot of Stan's recent moves, I think are making a lot of the Chicago fan base frustrated and feel like the wrong guy got fired. So, Kevin, I'll turn it to you. Do you think the wrong guy got fired? Do you think the right guy got fired? Do you think, if Quenneville got fired, they both should have been fired? Love to hear we've talked obviously offline about this, but just give the folks your thoughts.
So I blogged. I forget when exactly it was, but it was early in the off season, this past off season, and I was sort of wondering to myself, like, is it time for the Hawks to move on from Joel Quenneville? Because he had a talented group in 2016. They were correct me if I'm wrong, they were the best team in the Western Conference.
Yep.
Yeah, so very talented group. And sort of the same story for the next couple of years. You had a really talented group. You had your veteran core still there. Then you had sort of an influx of younger guys with like Nick Schmaltz, bringing back Saad last year. But then, like, once the offseason came and I saw the moves that Bowen was making, it just kind of like, it's like you said, Nick, like, you're not really giving Quenneville much to work with. And it's sort of a tough hand that he got. So I flipped on it a little bit. And it's not to say that they fired the wrong guy, because I think at some point, and it was going to be sooner rather than later, that Quenneville was going to need to, get moved out. The Hawks were going to have to move on. But there's just so many reasons and so many ways that they did it incorrectly. And that's why I'm sort of like, I'm obviously stunned, but like, it hit me a little more harder than I thought it would have.
Am I being a little dramatic when I say the timing of it was a little gutless, and the fact that it almost seemed like Bowman was looking for an excuse now that
Yes,
Crawford is back?
yes,
Like, it's like the first time. I mean, they started the year 6-2-2. With Crawford, I think only having played 2 of the first 10 games or so. Like, I want to say he only played like 2 or 3 of those games that when they were 6-2-2. And it seems like they kind of just fired Quenneville the first time some adversity hit the team this year, which was they're on a 5-game losing streak. The last 2 games that Quenneville coached, Patrick Kane was out with an illness, and Duncan Keith got ejected 2 minutes into the game. These are the last 2 games Joel Quenneville coached. And from a PR standpoint, I've seen a lot worse news dumps, but it was conveniently also a Tuesday election day in the United States. And in a state like Illinois, where politics are always, a hot topic of discussion, as they are everywhere, but Illinois and the city of Chicago have seen their fair share of, political drama. So, obviously there's gubernatorial stuff going on, and it seemed like it was almost like a slap in the face that they kind of just canned a guy with the second there was some adversity and almost news dumped it in a way. Am I being dramatic when I say that the timing of it was a little gutless or ridiculous?
I think it was just purely coincidental. It was a Monday. That's typically, I feel like, when you're gonna let someone go.
Was it Tuesday though?
Holy shit! Yeah, it was yesterday. Fuck, you're right. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I just kind of forgot what day it was. Anyways,
seems like ages ago.
Yeah, it's been a lot to digest. Either way, yeah. I had initially I had kind of a similar thought, like, yeah, they kind of waited. They waited until Quenneville made a significant mistake, such as he did, like in Calgary with the penalty, choosing to leave the guy on the bench. I don't want to say it was gutless, because I think, like, I don't know. I don't want to say it was a news dump or anything, but it's just overall, I think my overall sentiment is they handled it very poorly. If they were going to do it, 15 games into the season, they might as well have just fired him at the beginning of the year, because Stan Bowman clearly did not want him to be the head coach of the Blackhawks.
I 100% agree with you.
So
I also think, in my opinion, as if the folks at home can't tell, like, I'm incredibly disappointed and have been with the asset management and when they have had salary cap room, the decisions that were made with the money. So I'm I know it's easy to say, like, since their last Stanley Cup, I've been pissed at the GM, but like, you're like 2014, right? Where, Stan kind of retooled on the fly around the core after they had the cap purge in 2010. 11 and 12 were a little rough, but 13 and 14, they were, arguably the best team in the Western Conference, won the cup in 13 and lost a coin flip series to the Kings, which is probably the greatest playoff series that you and I have seen in our short lifetimes, was that 7-game series. And then they went back to the conference final, won the Stanley Cup in 15. It's easy to say, like, now that we're going on 3-4 years without a cup, it's easy to be disappointed. But I mean, it just seems like there have just been bad move after bad move in a row. But what I'm getting at is, in my opinion, I'm open to the idea that Jeremy Colleton could be a young coaching sensation, like the Sean McVay of the NHL, right? Some guy who's open-minded, just gets the offense going here. Seems like he's a big proponent of analytics and using all the data at hand. Not to say Quenneville wasn't progressive in that sense, but it potentially Colleton is a little more. But it's just funny that I just don't think, to bring it full circle, if you're going to fire Quenneville like they did, it's just crazy to me that Stan's still standing. I either think Stan should have gone They should have brought in someone else, put a little more pieces around Q. If shit didn't improve, then you know what, Q really is a problem. Or you should have fired them both at the same time. But I just think it's crazy that Q is gone and Stan is still there, and that Stan had the power to hire the next coach, which is now his first coaching hire. As Blackhawks general manager, this is his first hire because Talon's the guy that fired Savard and promoted Quenneville from a scout.
Yeah, I've been a proponent of that day one. I've always thought that Bowman should get a chance to choose his first head coach and get a chance to right the ship a little bit. I have no doubts that Jeremy Colleton can, sort of get this franchise back to where it needs to be. I do have concerns about what he can do with this current group, though, because it sort of seems to me like it sort of seems to me like Stan Bowman half-assed this roster construction to be suited for Joel Quenneville. Like I'm trying to explain this well enough that you understand. Like, it seems like he constructed this roster, solely for Joel Quenneville, but he like willingly or knowingly did not as good of a job as he could, if that makes sense.
You think he sabotaged the roster?
That's what I'm afraid it's sounding like, but that's not exactly what I'm thinking. But either way, like,
I mean, he did Q. As much as I love the guy, one thing
think about it. We'll think about it now that I think about it. He has sort of sabotaged the personnel. Stan Bowman. He fired Mike Kitchen. I mean, I'm not going full tinfoil hat here, but like, he did fire Mike Kitchen, who he knew by doing that he'd piss off Joel Quenneville. There's no doubt about that. He made at least two very significant moves that very clearly pissed off Joel Quenneville. And like, I mean, overall and everything, there was clearly no like cohesion between the two of them.
Which Stan denied in the press conference. He was like, I actually think we had a very open relationship and we communicated well with each other. And I'm like, you're so full of shit. Like,
yeah, it was very hard to watch that press conference, but I digress.
The comments were crazy. I thought he was the biggest. I thought he had the worst performance of anybody. I thought was McDonough.
Yeah, we'll get to that, but I want to say that I think Jeremy Colleton represents like where the league is going in terms of style of play. He's all about speed, like you said, analytics, sort of the newer age. Whereas, we know for sure that Quenneville was sort of stubborn in some of the ways that he coached hockey. Not to say that it wasn't successful, because it obviously was, but I think Colleton, like he can be very, very successful. But the problem, like I said, with making this move now is, why didn't you do this if you wanted to fire him? Do it at the end of last year. Go into the offseason knowing you have Colleton as your head coach. Do what you can to construct a roster that's better suited for his style, and it gives him a little better chance. Whereas now he's sort of thrown to a fire, and it's hard to think that he's going to come in and have a successful stretch of his first 10 games, Like, they're going to struggle quite a bit.
Well, Kevin, the reason that they brought, just by listening to the press conference, the story they're giving the fan base and the hockey community is that they didn't think it would be fair after the way things kind of spiraled out of control last year to fire Quenneville, because they didn't have Corey Crawford for a large stretch of last year. And McDonough and Bowman feel as though that Bowman made some improvements to the roster. You and I are on the same page that we don't really think that he had a great offseason, other than utilizing their draft positioning as the 8th overall pick to get a nice future defense piece in Adam Gwtf. Other than making what seems to be a smart pick with the 8th overall pick, the free agent signings and the lack of trading for a proven defenseman, which we had been talking about. Are they gonna poach one of the guys from Carolina? Are they gonna do this? They didn't make a big move on the blue line. The blue line move they made was in the draft, and Manning, Kunitz, and Ward was the offseason. But the story they're giving the fans is it wasn't a it wouldn't be fair to fire Joel after they didn't have Crawford for a bunch last year, and with an improved roster, not to at least give Joel a shot with Corey back and an improved roster. That's the story they're going with. I think it's, I just think they're kind of just quite frankly delusional that they think this roster is, McDonough's like, we think this is a playoff team. Like, they play in like toughest division in hockey. And there's a lot of holes on this team that we've gone, we've beat a dead horse talking about the holes on this team. I just think they have way too much confidence in the roster, I think, right now. Some of these guys are a little older, a little longer in the tooth now, specifically Keith and Seabrook. The Seabrook contract limits their flexibility a little bit. Some of the younger guys aren't quite flashing as much as we'd hoped yet, like Sakura's not up and Schmaltz isn't doing so well. And that's, I know you want to maybe get into this, especially with the defense part of it, but I think maybe Schmaltz's struggles to start the year and the fact that Sakura's in Rockford and, some of this other stuff is maybe why maybe kind of another, breaking point was they didn't feel Quenneville was developing some of the younger guys as well as they'd hope. I think Yokoharu is an example of a guy that looked okay under Quenneville, but I think you want to get into Colleton, really getting the best out of some of the young guys that are kind of the new core moving forward.
So I think Yokoharu is kind of an outlier because he's just obviously a very talented, very intelligent defenseman. But one of the silver linings I saw out of this whole debacle was that I really do think that Colleton can get the younger guys going. And exactly like you said, Nick Schmaltz has, to put it bluntly, he's been terrible this year. And especially in his contract year, for both parties, that's not ideal. Dylan Sakura, we expected to see him on the roster from day one. He was assigned to Rockford to sort of season a little bit more. And then now you're seeing stuff from Scott Powers, I believe. He said that he should be coming up pretty soon. So one of Colleton's, his strong points and what people rave about is he's a good communicator. And it's sort of like, I don't want to compare it like you did to Sean McVay because it's, kind of rough being two different sports and
yeah,
a lot of different variables.
He's 43. He's the youngest coach in the league now, isn't he? Has to.
Yeah, I think by like 10 years or some shit.
Right. That's why I threw it out there because I think they're like the same age and they're brand new to head coaching, but whatever.
But like, I was thinking about this today, and this is about baseball, and I'm going to tie this back to hockey. Just bear with me. But there's like this overwhelming idea that like these younger, like this new wave of younger talent and across all sports really is in a word kind of they're babied throughout their whole time being developed as they go into the pros, so they don't really respond well to old school coaching or how the players in the generation above them were brought up. So in a way, like, you need guys that can communicate with these younger guys and sort of push all the right buttons. So, like, for example, if you need guys that respond well to being like, babied a little bit, a more passive approach. You need guys that need to be kicked in the ass a little bit. You need guys that can sort of respond to the needs of each and every player. Whereas we see like a guy like Quenneville is, he's obviously a player's coach. Everyone loves him, but he's a pretty aggressive guy. He's not shy to get in your face and yell at you. So I think
he's also known for putting some people in some serious doghouses.
Yeah. And that's another criticism of Quenneville is, a lot of young guys that come up, he's pretty quick to put in the doghouse. It's a short leash. But anyways, I think Colleton, what he can do is he can sort of communicate better to these younger guys. Schmaltz, not really DeBrincat because he's obviously had success under Quenneville, but Sakura, maybe even a Gustav Forsling potentially.
Connor Murphy's a young guy. If he's back from injury, maybe he looks better. I'm open to the idea that
these are guys. These are some guys that have also played with Carlton a little bit. Sakura did.
Yeah.
Victor Edsel did.
Oh God, they need to get him going.
Yeah. Well,
the Hartman trade's another one right now. Oof. I mean, Badan could be good, but oof.
To that, I think Colliton actually benched Edsel in the playoffs, or not the playoffs maybe, but like when he came to the Blackhawks, Colliton benched him. You know, he healthy scratched him a couple times. So I guess there's that element of sort of being aggressive with these guys and give them a kick in the ass every once in a while. So I do think ultimately he'll be able to get these guys to where they need to be and where they should be. But it's weird because he has a really unusual mix of players with this handful of young guys, but then he has these grizzled vets who are also uber talented. But it's going to be hard. Like, how is he going to? It's hard to think like Patrick Kane sitting in practice and this 33-year-old guy comes in and tells him how to start playing hockey. Not necessarily that, but like it's what I'm getting at. Like some of these older guys are going to be like, all right, what does this guy know?
I think there's going to be a mutual respect in that.
Well, yeah, obviously, but like, I think what I'm trying to get at is like, I'm not to say that he's going to totally switch up how the Hawks play because I think he, has a similar coaching style or like sort of X's and O's wise to Quenneville, but like, I think there's going to be a pretty sizable grace period and sort of getting used to how he plays the game, just the small intricacies of how he plays, that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think as much as we talked about how unfair it was to Quenneville with the timing and everything, and arguably maybe if you're going to fire him, do it before the year. If you're going to fire him, maybe Stan should have gone with him. At the same time, that press conference that we talked about, we mentioned before a little bit, I thought it was actually kind of unfair to Jeremy Colliton because although it's kind of a somber day to lose Q, like maybe do the fire Q press conference and the introductory press conference separately because like this is a huge moment in this guy's career. Like this is a pretty momentous thing for him to become the head coach of an Original Six franchise and for it to be your first NHL coaching job. Like for him, like he even said that Q was kind of a bit of a mentor for him when he got into the Blackhawks organization within the past couple of years. But I mean, all the media wanted to do is, I mean, they asked him a few questions, and I mean, he's the new coach and he was there, but a lot of the questions were to Rocky and to Stan and John McDonough, regarding the rationale behind the timing, why it was fired, what it means for, what message is it sending to the fans, like what were the reasons they fired him, like did they ever consider firing Stan? Like a lot of the questions weren't even toward him, so I almost felt bad for Jeremy Colliton because he's kind of like caught in this awkward situation where, I mean, he's the new coach, but all people want to talk about is the guy that's not the coach anymore. You know what I mean? And that was kind of tough. But I also wanted to, do you have any thoughts on McDonough's comments? I mean, he said that he fully believes in Stan's roster and that Stan has a great body of work, or two quotes he mentioned. And on the radio today, he basically said that he reaffirmed that he believes that Stan's roster was not maximized under the previous head coach. I mean, I thought the whole he fully believes in the roster thing, I think he's basically just up there lying, quite honestly, because, I mean, what else are you going to say? Like, no, I don't believe in the roster. Like, of course, you decided to keep Stan Bowman around. You're not going to sit there and be like, oh, I don't trust the guy that I decided to keep. But just any thoughts on McDonough? And I'd also say, and just not to add too much onto your plate in your response, but I think Stan Bowman put a lot of pressure on himself. And I don't think anyone would disagree with this in the sense that he put a lot of pressure on himself because he stood up to upper management and obviously convinced Rocky and John McDonough and said, we are better moving forward without Joel Quenneville? And are you going to let me hire the guy I want to hire? Well, now Stan's roster is there, and he hired his handpicked coach. If things don't get better, he might have just outed himself. Any thoughts?
I think just one more thing now that because you sort of made me remember this cap space that we currently have, 5.4 million.
Right.
Who's to say that Stan doesn't, make a move right away to sort of, complement the roster right now and maybe to Carlton's strengths? I don't know. That's kind of a unlikely thing to happen right away per se, but like if Bowman truly has this much pressure on himself and he's uh sort of being a GM and he's sort of on the hot seat right now. I was gonna say coaching for his job, but like that's not what he's doing, obviously. But you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, of course.
it's kind of do or die right now for him.
Yeah, I think he might have. I mean, if this team doesn't look much better, they might have a new. They might have a new GM next year.
But also, like the thing is, firing Bowman, by I don't even know, like during the year by the All-Star break per se, like then this whole franchise as a whole is just a total, I don't want to say dumpster fire, but like it is a
it's a gong show.
Far cry from where they were 3 years ago.
I'll even add another element to it. If Stan hires his handpicked coach and the roster doesn't do better, and you have a new GM come in,
Carlton's gone too.
Right. Well, I was going to say, unless it's an internal hire that was a Stan backer that also was all in on this guy, I mean, you might have another coach, a second coach after Quenneville in like less than a year.
Mm-hmm.
So
I agree 100%.
I mean, maybe Stan could have Rocky and John and everybody convinced that this might not be their year. They need time for Carlton's system to be implemented. They need to make some tweaks to the roster to tinker to his style. Maybe if things don't improve, Stan makes it to the beginning of next year. But I think if he does and they get off to another slow start, like his ass is probably grass. So we'll see. But any other lasting thoughts? Because they're also, since our show last week, there was another coaching firing with the aforementioned LA Kings when we talked about their 2014 playoff series against the Hawks. They fired John Stevens. Any thoughts there? I think that's another case where a coach is getting fired with a roster that, quite frankly, when is the last time the LA Kings have developed a substantially good young player? Like, it just seems like they just have these vets that have just gotten older and older, and then you just bring in a guy like Kovalchuk. Like, if you want to count Tyler Toffoli, maybe. I mean,
that was gonna be the one guy, and even there, that's not like like a staple of your franchise. He's
right.
he's a good hockey player, but
Yeah. Yeah, it's just another case where, Sutter is kind of comparable to Quenneville. He wasn't in LA even close to as long as Quenneville was in Chicago. But, Sutter and Stevens, it's kind of one of those things where they thought Stevens could come in and get more out of or get promoted from the assistant spot and get more out of the roster. And, quick trigger this year on him. So any other thoughts on that? They hired.
He kind of gave him a little a little kick in the ass right when they made that change because they obviously made a push and made it to the playoffs to obviously get swept by the Vegas Golden Knights. But yeah, it's I think it also just speaks on like how volatile this business is, how little job security there is. And just how much pressure there is on these coaches. Like, and that's why it's another element of the Carlton hire. It's like this guy's 33. He's been in the States for a couple of years.
Yeah.
because he was in, what was it, Sweden?
Yep.
Yep. So and yeah, it's just like, talk about pressure. Like you touched on this a little while ago. Original six franchise, you know, coming off a dynasty, 3 cups in 6 years. Um, yeah, big shoes to fill for being a guy that's been in the States for a handful of years. So yeah, tough break for these guys, kind
Yeah.
of it's kind of unfair in a way,
Hmm.
because they, not say that they didn't ask for it, because they obviously want to be head coaches in the NHL, but like, you come into these two franchises that had sustained success simultaneously. I guess that's kind of irrelevant, but it's big shoes to fill. And when you ask these sort of young guys to take over these franchises with high expectations, it's kind of unfair because they weren't around for the development of these players and all that stuff. So a lot of stuff going against them.
Well, you had a little bit of a premonition about a guy that the Kings, outside of Willie Desjardins becoming the interim coach. You, not that you predicted that, but aside from that, thought we'd mention who was replacing Stevens in the interim. But you had a little bit of a premonition that we've talked about on this show before, huh? Came true.
Yeah, not to say that I called it, but I called it. It's like the Kings just, I hate to, keep going back to what you said, but you're spot on. Like it's really, there's no like direction. They're not trying to get younger. They're like, I don't want to say they're trying to get older, because that's like, no one's obviously wanting to do that, but that's kind of what they're doing. Like there's no effort to sort of uh recoup some young talent, develop some younger guys, and try to keep this thing going. It's like they're just trying to press what they have right now, and it's kind of desperate because they're locked into a lot of long-term deals, like Kopitar, Quick, Drew Doughty. That's, jury's still out. It's kind of hard to argue against that contract, but it's like,
Why did he sign there? Fuck.
I, I I told him not to do it. I told you, Drew Doughty, if you're out there, I told you not to do it. Anyways, yeah, I just don't get it.
Well, the premonition thing, obviously, we talked about the Kings either last show or the one before, but one guy you had mentioned, Adam Oates. I think you had some thoughts on that, maybe. Uh, getting
Yeah. So Adam Oates, by the way, he just got hired as a consultant for the LA Kings. I think it's just like a personal skills or
Mhm.
individual skills consultant. And I was thinking, because so what Adam Oates has been doing, for all those that don't know, is he's sort of been working as sort of a private, uh, instructor, or not really instructor, but he's helping out a lot of players in NHL. Jonathan Toews has gone to him. I think Connor McDavid's working with him, believe it or not. Teddy Purcell, he did a while ago. Now he's working with Adam Oates. But there's a lot of guys who have, sort of struggled. They've had their share of struggles, and they reach out to Adam Oates, who's, uh, sort of been showing them these little things. Is watching film with them and just sort of making small little tweaks to their game, and then they go out the next year and they return to form, if not greater. Anyways, I thought it's going to get to a point where, like, when's a team going to want to just bring him in for themselves and just have exclusive access to this guy,
Mhm.
uh, you know, and just give him, or have their players get his full attention. And lo and behold, the LA Kings bring him in, um, to do exactly what I thought they would. But
Yeah.
one thing I was kind of confused on is, Adam Oates he's been on the record saying like he just likes working with players on the side. He coaching. He coached with the Devils for a little bit, and it kind of came off as like coaching just really wasn't for him. He obviously loves the game of hockey, being around it, but he just loves to, work with guys on the side and just help out guys. And being a consultant, being on retainer for a franchise can be kind of grueling.
Mhm.
And I just don't really know how well he's going to mesh with getting back into a really rigorous schedule. working every single day with these guys as opposed to, just being sort of free to do whatever he wants and, getting with guys every week or so or,
Yeah,
things like that. So
I wonder how involved he's going to be if he's going to be around at all the practices or, like, is he going to pop in a couple times a month or they just, paying him just to come in there? And, obviously I think what this definitely means is, Taves and McDavid probably can't go work with him again. There's probably a deal there where all of his personal coaching attention has to be on guys involved with their organization, I would assume.
Yeah, that's without a doubt. And the thing is, like, they must have given him, I mean, I don't want to assume, but like for a guy who loves to work with guys around the league and to sort of restrict this guy from doing any of that and only bringing him in to work with your guys, they must be paying him quite handsomely to do that. Because, like I said, he loved what he did. He loved just being sort of on his own schedule. And this is kind of the complete opposite of that.
Yeah, well, I wonder if Adam Oates can, make Kopitar 25 again and make Jeff Carter 24 and some stuff like that. I mean,
yeah, right.
Kopitar was nasty last year, for the record.
Kopitar is just nasty in general.
Yeah, even with him playing he was like a top 3 MVP like vote getter. It was him, Hall, and McKinnon, wasn't it, for MVP last year?
I believe you're right. Yeah, and he's a perennial Selke candidate. So.
Right. Even with him playing at an all-world level, probably one of his best offensive years of his career, the Kings' offense still was nowhere to be found against Vegas. And even though he's a great player, it's hard to expect him to, right, in such a deep, talented league to, as he gets older, he's probably like in his prime, but like, exiting it, I think is fair to say soon. Like he'll still be a productive player for a number of more years, but he's probably, in the twilight of his prime, if that makes sense.
He's not going to be getting any better.
Probably not. It's just hard to expect him to go out and match what he did last year.
Yeah.
And the Kings were still brutal, in the offensive department, even with him playing at that level, even with him carrying that offense. Like they're still, I don't think they scored over 2 goals in a game against Vegas in that series, did they? In the 4 games? Like, did they ever hit? I don't even think they hit. I think they only scored like 4 goals in 4 games.
I think you're right. They were all low scoring games. Obviously, LA losing all of them. So, yeah, it couldn't have been more than like.
They were all like 1-0, 2-0.
Yeah, it couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 goals.
Yeah, it was unbelievable how bad that was. So, yeah, I think it's another thing where there's only so much that having a third new voice in the last couple years to these guys, and there's only so, and then having a notes come in, like they can come in and they can be a new voice and point out some things to improve their game, and maybe Desjardins a guy that's going to manage guys' minutes better. He's gonna, maybe I don't know what I know he coached in Vancouver. I don't know what he's really like known for. I don't know, in his time as an assistant or anything, like what he was necessarily in charge of or anything like that. But there's obviously he brings something that made Rob Blake and company want his voice to be heard rather than Stevens at this point. But there's only so much you can do and you can say, and at some point it all comes back to the front office and hockey operations needing to put more talent on the ice. And I think the Blackhawks and the Kings are kind of eerily similar stories. 2 teams that had a 4 to 5 year run of pretty dominant hockey, and now you're seeing a little bit of suspect hockey operations and maybe not the best performance out of some young guys that you'd like to see. I think the Blackhawks are doing a little bit better developing their young players compared to the Kings, but I don't think either organization has been nearly perfect in that department.
I think it's hard for me to speak for the Kings because I actually don't pay as much attention to them as I do the Blackhawks. But at least, there's sort of there's obviously a concerted effort by Bowman to to build up this defense in the coming years. He's drafting all these high end. I wouldn't say high end, but he's spending his early round draft picks on defensemen. So by like 2020 or so, we should have a pretty solid top four if things, go to plan. But with what's happened recently, it's really hard to imagine Bowman being here in 2020. I really don't see it happening because even if he, even if he sort of gives this roster a new life, so to speak, like the damage has been done. The core is going to be gone not gone, but they'll be hardly what they've been.
Yeah.
So, at that point, he'll be gone, and you just need to sort of, I don't know if you're going to start over completely or I'd say it's more of a retool, obviously, because
it seems like they had a couple extra years within a window to win, and a little bit of mismanagement kind of cost them probably another cup run or two, quite honestly.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not, I'm not guaranteeing they would have won a cup or anything, but I think, years like 16, 17, and last year are all years that, they should have been going on some more deep runs. Whether or not that they would have gotten more hardware out of it is another debate. But,
At this point, I will say the Panarin Saad trade as of right now is totally unforgivable. And, like,
we didn't. At the time, though, we're allowed to have hindsight because we're not getting paid millions of dollars. We're doing a free podcast with no ads for you guys. So thank us later for that. But, we're allowed to have hindsight. But I think we understood the idea, the whole cost certainty, right, of knowing that Saad was locked up for 2 extra years. And
there were reasons to like it when it happened. But
right.
I saw that myself. But especially when you trade off Panarin and he goes on to have a point per game year in Columbus. He's an absolute stud in the playoffs. And then you have then you switch it back over to the Blackhawks and you're reading about Brandon Saad. He's a guy who's only playing for a contract and he doesn't care anymore, things like that. And now you're locked up with him for the exact same price that Panarin was at.
Maybe that's
albeit for 2 years. But like the thing is, like you just said, we had these 2 or 3 more extra cup runs that we could have had, and that Panarin, in hindsight, that Panarin deal shut the door on that.
Probably. And honestly, the whole Saad dilemma, maybe that's when they talk about guys, not maximizing the roster. Maybe they're putting some blame on Q for not getting the best out of Saad. Whether or not that's fair, I
think that's kind of a fair criticism.
Yeah, if the guy's not motivated, that's one thing. If those rumors are true,
the thing is, if that's the case, I guess that's not Joel's fault. That's not Quenneville's fault. If he's inherently just sort of an unmotivated hockey player, that's on Bowman.
Well, we've been kind of on a witch hunt on Stan Bowman so far this episode. Obviously, we kind of understand part of why Q lost his job. There's some elements in the timing of it we disagree with. But speaking of witch hunts, folks, did you see what Milan Lucic did? And what the hell was George Peros thinking with the discipline he laid down? This is just fucking bizarre.
So from what I saw, he's only got fined $10,000, correct?
Absurd. If you ask me, absurd. But
when I saw it, I there wasn't really any context to it because obviously there could have been stuff going on before the player earlier in the game, whatever. But I feel like the best way to look at a hit like that is exactly that way, without context. I feel like that's how you get the most, unbiased analysis on it. That was just insane. He's clearly just staying behind the play, going after this guy, takes him down, and then just starts shoving his face into the ice. It was incredible.
It was premeditated.
It was like I was like, is this really happening?
Not to sound like a bitch, but it was pretty much premeditated assault, is what it was.
Well, yeah, he was sort of Lucic was just swimming on the blue line, just had
If you watch
eyes
the
on this
video,
guy.
the puck isn't even in the picture.
Yeah, like you just saw Lucic swimming across the blue line, just ready to just murder this guy. And that's pretty damn close to what actually happened.
Yeah, it was Matthew Joseph, who I believe is a rookie.
Yep, he's a rookie.
Young guy. I mean, here's Lucic, 30 years old. Like,
such a piece of shit. I hate that guy.
I'm gonna echo a sentiment I just said before. Not to be a bitch, but like, dude, like pick on someone your own size. Like, if you're gonna be like a shithead like that, and you're gonna go chase a guy and try to dummy somebody like that, like, go fight. Try to go after someone in your own like weight class. You know, like going after a fucking scrawny ass rookie. Like, what the fuck did that guy do to Milan Lucic? Like, he's some fucking superstar anymore. Like, first of all, we've been roasting some people on the show for some bad decisions. A guy we've roasted many a times, another front office guy we're going to roast, Peter Chiarelli. That contract is terrible. Terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Just one of the worst in the league right now is Milan Lucic. So
I looked up the tail of the tape while you were talking right there. So you have Matthew Joseph billed in at 6'1", 190. Then you got Milan Lucic at 6'3", 230. So he is just like so much bigger than this guy. He's got 40 pounds on him. Like, ever since that Dale Weiss thing, you know what I'm talking about, in the playoffs, in the handshake line, Lucic sort of just like,
oh yes,
I was like, honestly, like, I'm just sort of that way, like,
he's
especially in hockey. Yeah, when you talk about like the handshakes line, you know, like you can hate these guys, you know, when the puck's in play, when they're playing hockey, but afterwards, you know, when the dust settles, you got to be able to just go like swallow your pride, shake the guy's hand, and move on. And just like, if a guy doesn't do that, and especially to, you know, sort of do it in such a dramatic way as Lucic did, I'm like, you know, just fuck this guy, like.
Yeah, I mean,
then, yeah, ridiculous.
But this guy, though, it's just kind of like, it's like, what the hell is he good for anymore? Like, he's not fast.
He's making $6 million a year, isn't he?
Yeah, it's a terrible deal. I think it's $6 million. I think it's the cap hit on that. He's just like
6x6, I believe, is what it was.
All he is a fucking boat anchor. How about that? That's what Milan Lucic is. Absolute fucking boat anchor.
He does not compliment Connor McDavid well. Let's say that.
Yeah, and then on a team where you're paying McDavid a lot now, because he deserves every penny.
Well, yeah.
But when you have a guy signed to a contract like that, when you have mistake guys like Lucic on that team, like, oh my, I mean, we could go into how, I mean, we've ranted about how Stan has mismanaged the roster with some poor moves, but goddamn, Peter Chiarelli, just the end of his Boston tenure and some of the moves he's made with Edmonton. I mean, obviously the Sagan and Hall trades. I mean, the fact that the guy is allowed to run hockey operations after being the man behind those two moves, like, Jesus Christ. The man in, like, was it a calendar year or 2 years that he traded both Sagan and Hall? Like, just preposterous. I mean, he traded a guy who just got a huge deal, who was really good for Dallas, and then he traded the guy who won the MVP last year.
I think it was more than a year, but like both those deals are just, you know, Sagan, there's no one in Boston, that deal, like from that deal that they got, no one is longer there. I think that was as of like early last year. And then the Taylor Hall deal was like, I remember at the time I was like, yeah, this is kind of a dumb deal. Like, if you need defensive help that much, then like, okay, but still, it's Taylor Hall, #1 overall pick. He's like, what, 24 at the time, and then he wins MVP. Like, holy fuck.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. Like, I feel like if New Jersey was probably like, or Lamoriello still at the time, was he there? No. Fuck. Oh, it's Ray Shero, who got Taylor Hall. Like, Ray Shero was probably like, you know, like, we'll take, you know, some other forward on Edmonton, right? We'll take, they would have probably
Ryan Nugent-Hopkins.
Yeah, right. Like Taylor fucking Hall was like a 70-point winger on like bottom of the league teams, right? Like just man, goddamn. Like if you have McDavid, Draisaitl, and Taylor Hall right now, your franchise probably looks a little different.
Yeah.
Still lacks on the end, but still lacks on the board line. But
your defense is still pretty bad, but like it's not like Adam Larson makes it that much better.
Right. Adam Larson's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, if you ask me. Like he's just like a really solid like number 4 defenseman, but Taylor Hall's like a game breaker. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, he's a league MVP.
That's all I don't know if anybody foresaw that.
Well, yeah. He's not like he's not 100. He's not going to put up 100 points a year. He's not that type of player, but he's an elite player, obviously.
Yeah.
Just what he did for New Jersey last year. He was like
on very bad teams, which says a lot about
he scored 40 more points than the next highest guy last year.
In
New Jersey.
Yeah.
That is unbelievable. That's one of those. That's like.
And Kyle Palmieri is pretty damn good.
Huh? And
Kyle Palmieri is pretty damn good.
Yeah, like that whole team is pretty damn good.
Yeah, they're off to a great start this year.
Mm-hmm.
Hines kind of pushes the right buttons with that team, and they got a nice goaltending tandem with Blockade and Corey Schneider.
Blockade.
Yeah, it's a sick nickname.
It is.
Sick. I love that nickname. Probably one of the best in the league, if you ask me. Blockade's good. And we're recording here on Wednesday night, so this episode will drop Thursday the 8th, as we mentioned. I think I mentioned the intro, but fuck it if I didn't. We'll have to see what the discipline is, but we had a bit of a suspect hit involving a couple star players on the East Coast, didn't we?
What would you be talking about?
Malkin Oshie?
Yeah, suspect is putting it lightly, but it was something. It was quite something.
Yeah, Oshie's kind of just over the middle, or kind of I think moves the puck over, and he's skating, and then he's just super delayed. Like we're talking like 2-3 seconds late, and Malkin just is an absolute unit, right? He just comes in with a shoulder.
Well, I think Malkin was carrying the puck, right, and then he passed it off.
Maybe
and he immediately just shoulders Oshie right in the chin.
Yeah, it's one of those. Maybe it was one of those accidental on purpose kind of things, but
no.
Yeah.
Malkin. First of all, Malkin knows exactly what he's doing. He's not
like accidentally on purpose, like tries to make it seem as though it was.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, well,
we'll have to see what Peros does. Because Malkin's a star player, but at the same time, you can't have.
Peros isn't that kind. Peros isn't gonna go lightly on a guy because he's a star player. He's pretty strict.
Well, he didn't make an example out of a plug in Lucic, so I don't really know what his MO is.
Yeah, that's a good point. You got me there.
Lucic has a pretty. I'm not saying the guy's fucking Rafi Torres or something, but Lucic has definitely heard from player safety before, so I'll say, right? Like,
what was that?
I'm saying Lucic has heard from player safety before, right? Like, yeah. The one that jumps to mind is when he fucking pummeled Ryan Miller.
Wasn't
that him? When he fucking ran into Ryan Miller?
I was thinking when I think it was Pacioretty got taught like he was that might have been Chara.
That was Chara when he ran him into the turnbuckle.
Yeah. Oh my god, that was brutal. But
dude, the Montreal police got involved with that one.
Yeah, Lucic. There's not one positive thing I remember about Milan Lucic. Like he's just kind of a piece of shit.
It was a 2-3 year period where he was a pretty fucking dominant, immovable power forward. Like there was this random time where you had some good like power forwards in the NHL. Like you had Bufflin playing up front, you had Lucic playing up front. This is going to sound crazy, but there was actually a time where Chris Stewart was playing some really dominant hockey. So good that he was actually involved in the blockbuster with Shattenkirk. That was like a big trade, 6-7 years ago. when Shattenkirk got moved to the Blues from Colorado and everything. Or from Colorado to the Blues, I think I should say. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he just doesn't have many redeeming qualities now. I wouldn't tell this to the guy's face because he'd shit pump me. But, he's just kind of like, he's not productive. He's just doing stupid shit with the extracurriculars. And, he's got a heavy cap hit that he doesn't, quite frankly, really deserve. So, Milan Lucic is probably working toward buyout city, wouldn't you have to say?
Well, I don't know if Chiarelli knows how to do that.
Oh, true.
So that'll be something to watch for.
Yeah.
But
can I trade an all-star in order to buy out Lucic, do I need to trade an all-star?
Oh my God. Yeah. I was gonna say if there's one team he's just being an absolute bastard for, at least it's the Edmonton Oilers, and they're just kind of a total.
Oh Christ! He's got to be genius.
Huh?
This fucking Jamoke skating around out there, after what happened to poor Elias Peterson and them being in the same division, I bet Vancouver fans are just like, oh fuck, keep this motherfucker away from our fucking future. Just keep him. Whatever we got to do. We don't want Lucic going. It's honestly scary with all the talent in the league. If you have a guy like this, he's just going to go after some random nobody. Who's to say he's not going to take a liberty with all these good players in the league, right? And then, there's good players all across the league, but you look at the teams they play frequently. There's plenty of young, good talent on Calgary with Monahan and Gaudreau and with Pedersen and Besser and Vancouver. And, the Sharks got some, some newer wave guys that are pretty damn good, Hurdle and some other guys. I'm trying to think, God damn it. Who's the other guy? Timo Meyer. The thing is, I'm all for physical hockey and I love it. When you're just running around you're like a chicken with your head cut off and you're just being a dirty little shit, if you're going to, what I'm saying is if you're going to go after fucking Matthew Joseph, no disrespect to him, but if you're going to go after Matthew Joseph, who's to say now he's not going to go after a bigger fish, right?
Yeah. One thing I was thinking about at some point during this year was it's, it doesn't take a genius to notice that these enforcers, so to speak, these tough guys, guys who are supposed to be out there just to be a physical presence, they're sort of being weeded out slowly but surely. But then you have some of these guys, and I think Lucic is, not so much anymore, but when he signed his contract, he surely was. He was a guy that is a total cocksucker, and he's a cheap player, dirty player. He's shown instances of that, but he has enough skill to stay in the league. In the NHL, obviously they can't do anything about that. So who's to say, he's going to be on a roster and it'll get to a point where he just absolutely loses his mind and just actually abuses, a high level talent in the NHL. And it's a scary thought, and it's it sucks how actually possible it is.
Yeah, and not to keep ripping on Lucic, but to do exactly what I just said. When he moved, people forget he had a little stop in LA between Boston and the Oilers. Was he really maybe my memory stinks, but I don't remember him being nearly the force he was in Boston in LA to earn such a big contract like that. I feel like Edmonton was kind of we got, all these young pieces coming up. They're almost just kind of desperate to add a productive veteran. They kind of just blew their load on Lucic.
Yeah, and I just Googled that trade. The Bruins traded Milan Lucic to the Kings for Martin Jones,
who then they flipped immediately.
Yeah. For Martin Jones and the 13th pick in the NHL draft.
Who did that end up being? So some bad radio, but who did the Bruins select 13th overall?
2015 draft.
Wasn't McAvoy, was it? No.
Was it? No, McAvoy was top 10 pick, I think.
The 13th pick was Jakub Zaboral, but I believe the Bruins in that draft, they had like 3 picks. Like, I believe, call me crazy, I think they had the 13th, 14th, and 15th overall picks. Like, somehow they had, because I think they
2015 was McDavid, right?
Yes, I believe.
Okay.
They traded Dougie Hamilton, and they had the Lucic or the Martin Jones thing. So they had like their own pick, and then those 2 trades, and I think they ended up. Yeah, so they took. Yeah, they had 13, 14, and 15. I was actually right. They took Jakub Zaboral, then Jake DeBrusk, and then Zach Zenshine.
Jake DeBrusk worked out pretty well.
Yes. And then immediately after the Bruins went back to back to back, who do you think went 16th? Just a little quick. It was the Oilers draft pick, who they traded to the Islanders for Griffin Reinhart. And it was Matthew Barzal.
Oh, my God.
Yes. The Boston Bruins, that's a tough one. They had 3 straight picks back to back to back, and Barzal went right after their 3 straight picks. That, folks, is a tough one to swallow.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Don Sweeney, you done fucked up there. But, yeah, man, we've covered a lot. Anything else you want to cover? Covered everything ad nauseum. But
yeah, I think that's mostly it.
Saying that phrase, I think I've dropped that like 3 times. Ad nauseum.
It would suck to be on the Ottawa Senators right now, particularly one who was in an Uber.
God, we have to cover this. How the fuck did we forget? Great call. The show must go on, folks. Man.
Oh my God, that's like.
This is the worst hockey story involving a cab driver since Patrick Kane.
Well, in an Uber, you don't have to give a tip, so it wouldn't have been a problem for Patrick Kane. Think about that.
That is true. They do give you no free ads, but you can do that now. They give you the little, when you rate the guy, they're like, oh, would you like to add a tip? Or the girl. We're a sex-positive podcast. Obviously.
So like my thought on that is I just think it's kind of bogus because obviously, if you grabbed a couple guys from each NHL roster and you asked them, have you ever talked shit about your coach behind their back? 100% of them would raise their hand. And it's just kind of shitty that in a place like, I mean, how many times have you been absolutely blitzed, got into an Uber and just sort of rambled on? Like, that's going to happen. And
I probably roasted you in an Uber. And you probably roasted me in an Uber.
It's quite possible. And imagine that you're being filmed the whole time. Like it seems, I mean, it's kind of, practical to have a camera in there, given how many like drunk girls puke in Ubers and how much fucking nonsense goes on in Uber. But like the Uber driver, he was pissed off, I guess, about not getting a tip, something that you're not required to do, mind you. And I guess he tipped it off to TMZ or something. And then he absolutely just shafted these Senator players. So that is just an all-time douchebag move.
I'm sure Guy Boucher fucking loved this one.
Oh my God. Well, it wasn't.
Practice. Oh fuck.
They weren't talking shit to Guy Boucher.
Doesn't matter.
But like, oh my God. That's a guy. Imagine looking Guy Boucher straight in the face.
That scar and that fucking 1,000 miles hair. Oh. Yeah, that cab driver is an absolute shithead.
And these were like young guys too.
Yeah. Well, Duchesne was in there, right? Ryan DeMello, I believe, was in there.
Yeah, Ryan DeMello.
One guy who he's actually a good player. Fremington or what's his name? He just got sent back down to the OHL, but he's good.
I don't know.
Bad radio again.
Bad radio.
But yeah, I think there were 7 guys crammed in like a van or an SUV. I think there were 7 guys.
It was a lot, yeah.
All the time we're in the NHL level, and I mean, yeah, like what are you gonna expect? Like there's 7 guys. Like hockey. One thing you got to remember, and I almost feel bad. I feel bad for these guys because, like, one stereotype about hockey players is that they're tough as nails on the ice, but they're kind of like teddy bears off the ice. Like they're the most wholesome, like down to earth athletes. Like they're great guys. Like, there's not as much money in the NHL as there is in the MLB, the NFL, and the NBA. So a lot of times you get a lot less egos, right? Because I mean,
they're guys you'd want to go out to a hole in the wall bar and just have a beer with.
Right. But like the highest paid players in the league are getting like 11 million, right? And what are the highest paid quarterbacks getting, right? Like it just doesn't, it breeds less egotism, right? Mm-hmm. So they probably were talking, having a side conversation, as I'm assuming is how it began. And the guy was probably like, oh, like, who do you play for? Like, what do you guys do for a living? Or like, how do you all know each other? And, maybe they, had a little bit too much vino or something at the pub. And, we're like, oh yeah, we all play for the same NHL team. We all play hockey together. Oh, what team? This, that. So then he knew he, had some people in his car that had some notoriety, that had an audience. And when he got screwed out of his tip, like he just fucking exploited them. I mean, it's just bullshit. Like, because, a lot of times, I'm sure if those guys are all in the NBA or something, maybe they don't maybe they try not to let them know they're on like the Brooklyn Nets, right? Or some shit, which would be like the Ottawa Senators equivalent. But like, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like they probably were like very open and honest about their feelings and who they are just by the fact that they're hockey players, right? And that hockey players really are like really great people off the ice for the most part. I mean, there are some people that are not Slava Voinov, but it happens.
Yeah. I mean, not much more to say than like that Uber driver is just like
shit stain.
Like, what do you want to get out of that?
Like, I don't.
What is your objective? What are you trying to get?
15 minutes of fame. All the attention's on the fucking players.
Yeah, like no one's gonna give a shit about an Uber driver, and I don't even know where the fuck they were. But like,
was it like Arizona or something?
Maybe.
Stupid.
Either way, like, what do you expect to get? Like, I doubt TMZ is like dying for an Uber tape from with the Ottawa Senators in it. They're probably like, dude, we have no idea who's on the Ottawa Senators. Like, this is not worth our time.
TMZ's just paying like $20,000 to hear like Ryan DeMello just like roasting
our power play sucks, man.
Power play.
Oh.
Yeah, and like, what do you, and like any fans who are shocked by this, like you obviously like don't know, like you never played a sport or like you just don't know how athletes like operate. Like, not that you and I are athletes, but we played growing up. We played sports. Like, you're not always gonna agree with your coach and stuff, and you're gonna be more prone to criticism and criticizing, your coaches and stuff when things aren't going well because they're not a good team. So, of course, there's going to be shit that's on their chest that they're going to be ranting about and feeling bad about. So, like, of course that, if you're in the first – I mean, if a first-place team, the Golden State Warriors get in the cab, they're not making fun of Steve Kerr with any malice, right? But, like, yeah, I bet you if you get, like, the work – like the Tampa Bay Lightning probably aren't roasting John Cooper in a fucking Uber, right? Or maybe they do, but not for as long or not as many guys doing it. But I mean, they're not a good team. So like, yeah, this shit's gonna happen, right?
Yeah, and I bet I feel like you might disagree with this, but like something good's gonna come out of it. Like obviously now it's out there that the players don't like what they're doing on, I don't know if it's the PK or the power play, but obviously they think it's like terrible.
This is
And,
the moment,
they'll make a change.
the teachable moment, man. And now we can work together to achieve a common goal.
Yeah, but they probably, holy shit, Guy Boucher probably just worked the shit out of them the next day. Oh my God. They're probably hungover too.
Yeah, it's probably like from the Miracle movie. The lights go off at the rink. Another bag skate.
Again.
Again.
Oh.
Well, and they're all. They're probably just like fuck. Like things are going bad. Like they probably loved having Eric Carlson as a teammate. They're probably just like fuck. But,
yeah.
I mean, hey, it is what it is. I don't know if we're going to get into the jersey talk as much, but we got to wrap up soon. We don't want to make it too long so people actually can listen start to finish. But I think you and I both aren't big fans of the Bruins Winter Classic jersey and the elite Tampa Bay third jersey with the spray paint looking shit on the sleeves.
Yeah, I thought that was a practice jersey when you first sent that to me. It's terrible. The Bruins one I can live with. It's a Winter Classic jersey. Like that's kind of that's kind of what you're going to get from Winter Classic. Just a really old design. It's going to be hit or miss. Who cares? They'll wear it once. Not a big deal. But yeah, we get to see the Blackhawks jersey. I guess this will be today. So
it's black and white.
There's sort of an expectation or sort of an idea what it's going to look like. Again, not anything special, just something, that sort of embodies what the Winter Classic is about, just old-time hockey, that sort of thing. So,
yeah. And then, some other third jerseys have come out, and like the Kings one looks like their gray jersey they wore in their outdoor game against the Ducks at Dodger Stadium. That was also really weird when they played a hockey game at Dodger Stadium. That was weird, by the way. That was one of those forced stadium series outdoor games. And then like the Leafs are going to wear a St. Pat's jersey again. It sounds like, which I know they did for their special anniversary last year. But there's been some new designs, but a lot of these Adidas third jerseys are just like jerseys we've already seen before, with just like the new template, the new collars. Like it's nothing really like earth shattering. And like some of the new thirds are a hit, like the Ducks one's not bad, right? Can't go wrong with the Mighty Ducks logo. But yeah, there's been some rough ones with Carolina and this Tampa one. Yeesh. And I don't know if I'm a big fan of the Jets one either. That one's kind of like the powder blue one.
Dude, they had a layup. The original Winnipeg Jets sweaters those are nice. Like those are maybe outside the Blackhawks. Those are like some of the nicest sweaters ever. Those are so clean. And
I thought they were just gonna, even when the franchise came back, I was like, oh, like really? We're gonna go with a new? Not that their logo actually is kind of sick with the jet and the leaf. That's pretty dope. But it's a cool looking logo. But like, still like
that original one is just like
right.
That's all time.
Well, maybe they just wanted to be like, oh, it's a new era, it's a new team. Like we don't want to be associated with as much with the team that left town. Not that they left like in the middle of the night or anything, but obviously there's probably like ownership problems and stuff. But yeah, I was just surprised in general they didn't really, because there's kind of been a trend in sports where like kind of like vintage is kind of like modern now. Like you've seen some baseball teams, for example, like the Baltimore Orioles and the Toronto Blue Jays take jerseys that were like from the 70s and the 80s, and they just made them like their primaries again, right? And
yeah,
the past couple of years, and so like, then there's been this whole, with like random apparel with like snapbacks and stuff like that. Like people think that like old is cool now, right? In a lot of senses, and that's why these Winter Classic jerseys a lot of times are these older designs, because they know people like the vintage stuff. So yeah, like I know what you're saying, man. Like why the fuck wouldn't, like that's why the Ducks did the Mighty Duck thing, and I was surprised just as you are, and were that the Jets didn't. Yeah, implement their 80s, 90s look to their current set. So, yeah, I think that would have been an awesome, awesome alternate to have. Yeah. Damn.
Yeah, so
I
guess huh?
covered
Yeah, we
it.
did.
Yeah.
I mean, sort of a hard hitting topic for us with Quenneville, but it was good to vent about that for a little bit.
Good event. Yeah, it needs to be covered. I'm sure the fans that have been with our listeners, not fans. We don't have fans. We have listeners that have heard our Blackhawk takes. I'm sure had an idea that this was probably going to come. And that we were going to obviously discuss it. I mean, it's a huge story in the league, right? The guy coached some dynasties. Like, we obviously took a substantial amount of time to cover it. But I mean, we're Hawks fans. It's like the number one story in the league right now. It's an original six franchise.
He's one of the best coaches ever.
He's got 890 wins. He has the second most wins ever. So,
and to that point, Scotty Bowman, who's number one, he did it in. You could make an argument that Joe Quenneville is a little more impressive because he had to deal with the salary cap era. Scotty Bowman had some pretty legendary teams.
Yeah, I mean, Scotty Bowman coached the expansion Blues, which was definitely a task.
He did it in
Montreal, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not a conclusion, but like you could make the argument that Scotty Bowman had a little more to his advantage.
The man coached the late 70s Canadians. The Pittsburgh Penguins coach died in the early 90s, so he took over a Lemieux Yager squad, and then he coached those absolute wagon Red Wing teams from the late 90s and early 2000s.
And that team had no salary cap. They could just sign. It was like I don't know how many Hall of Famers are on that team.
Fucking absurd, dude. Like, the team, like that 2002 Cup team that the fucking Red Wings had like Datsuk was like a rookie. They had Yzerman, Shanahan, Fedorov,
Lidstrom,
Hasek, Brett Hull, Luke Robitaille, like just fucking
Ty Bertuzzi on those teams.
No, he was on Vancouver at the time because that's when fucking train wreck Steve Warren ended the guy's career. So yeah, but no, and Ty Bertuzzi's not a Hall of Famer, is he?
Well, yeah, I'm just saying. I'm just trying to think of players on that team.
Think Slava Kozlov was on those teams? Slava. I mean, like, maybe Holmstrom, but trying to think who else. Now, I don't know if Holmstrom was there yet. God, just trying to think. Guys like Chris Draper or Kirk Maltby.
There you go. There you go.
Solid depth guys like that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, here we are. Now we're just, hour 15 into the show, whatever the fuck we are. We're reminiscing about the 02 Red Wings. But, yeah, we covered a lot of bases here. Coaching hires, couple debatable hits, or coaching firings, and obviously the subsequent hirings. Dirty hits, jerseys, this and that. Like, yeah, was we're out only month or so into the season. We're like we had quite a bit to talk about today, yeah, who knows? We need some. Maybe there'll be some William Nylander news. We say this guy at the end of every show. Like, we over under how many more episodes we drop before William Nylander is playing on the ice somewhere. Like, who the fuck knows what's going to happen there? But yeah, that's all I got, buddy. Unless you got something else, but I think we covered pretty much everything we can for November 8th.
Yeah. Just for the record, I'm going to eventually talk myself into the Hawks trading for William Nylander, only to be incredibly disappointed because that's not a remote possibility. So putting that out there.
I mean, yeah. You have a lot of confidence in Stan Bowman. You have more confidence in John McDonough.
Huh?
You have more confidence in him than John McDonough.
Hey, you know what? I'll tell you what. William Nylander's father played for the Blackhawks. He's coming home.
Michael Nylander. That is true.
Think about it.
What is on the end of the show? Maybe Stan hoarded all this cap space. There you go.
For William Nylander just rolling out the red carpet, pulling out all the stops. William Nylander's our guy.
console all that defensive depth in the organization that they backed up if you're going to get that guy.
Yeah. See, you already got me going.
And it's gone. Peace, Kevin. Thanks for joining.
Right. Yep,
Talk next week. Bye, all.